Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm Emmanuel Viale, I'm French, like Stouffé, like you said earlier. So I come from Sophia Antipolis in the south of France, where we have a lab and innovation hub. This is actually my fourth times at Open Slava, but first time in person. So the digital experience I lived last year, I think I was in a breakout session on XR and the year before, connecting from my hometown and so forth. So very happy, honored to be with you guys today. Also, thank you for making me cool, because I can tell my kids later this weekend that I was on YouTube live. So thank you just for that. So you made my day. So indeed, in terms of getting a bit of into the details here, the Tech Vision 2024 of Accenture is all about that, something we've been doing for 21 years plus even, in a very analytical way. So try to predict the waves of metaverse, and I'll come back to that later. Good segue on some of the waves that delivered on their promises, some that maybe will take more time and so forth. So that's the context. It's not just like people in some labs or elsewhere. So we survey 20,000 end users this year. As part of that, so we asked many questions about, from end users. You mentioned ChatGPT and OpenAI and others, how we see as end users and projecting ourselves in the future, but also for the enterprise world with 3,450 C-level and directors, executives across different 20 industries and 21 different geographies across the board. So try to be as analytical, as thorough. And if the clicker is working or not, I don't know where, oh, there we go, perfect. Obviously, and I think that's a good segue, you stole some of my thunder earlier on about the evolutions of, for the past 40, 50 years. So I'm sure many of you were not born. I was just a young kid back then, but you can see from, the early ages of technologies. It started, of course, with personal computers. And here it's kind of this, indeed, exponential effect or rapid adoption. And sometimes, it comes as a surprise. Sometimes it takes more time. But I think here it's all these waves of, that have been adding to one another. So you will recognize, of course, the latest one in the last few years with Gen AI, and whether it's a number of users, really going exponential or rapidly 600%, whatever the number, over consecutive years, plus projections from the Gartners, IDCs, and others. We all have seen, and in the past ones, cloud, of course, now is something we take for granted. It's a lot of innovation in the cloud, of course, sector, but we take it for granted in, all technologies coming up, becoming cloud native. So without going back here, the summary is essentially we are here also on the verge of another wave. Now, how it will deliver, how it will shape, of course, is unknown. And I think what is important is every time applying it, like it was mentioned in the introduction before, how also we, and I'll come to that later, we make it in a responsible way for the environment, for the people, the bias, and everything. So here's a summary. Again, over the years, again, these waves of technologies have added to one another, right? So client server to internet to IoT, mobile, cloud, AI, adding on, layers, I might say, of technologies that have added over the years. Now, again, here to focus in the last few years of capability. So when we say AI, indeed, it's a broader set of technologies, and here I'll just skip to all these different domains. There is more. I'm sure many of you will point out that some of the at the bottom are missing, but starting with speech and language recognition and understanding and inference, all the way to computer vision, using cameras to understand many aspects in an environment by a computer, and so forth. And here the message is, indeed, it's first AI. Even Gen AI is a big buzz, but AI has been ongoing as back as, the 2000s and even before, for some of you were around or in the research labs back then. So what we see essentially, and you see on the far side, the way, thanks to cloud, thanks to this accumulation and added combinatorial effect, as we call it, of technologies, it's much more rapidly on the market. Personally, I'm in one of the lab in Sophia Antipolis, where several years ago, we were like 15 years ago looking at a particular particular technologies. You may have had at the time a few startups. You didn't have any standards, let alone about responsible, sustainable approach about any of this, and and it was taking time to adopt those technologies. I worked, for example, on NFC, near-field communication, back in 2008. So now, I checked in with my wallet, and whether it's NFC, visual, whatever. That's something 2006, 7 in labs we had, and for me, 2012, 15, oh yeah, it was done and everything. But it was taking more time. So here, messages when we look at code generation on the far side, or and you see on the scale now, we can debate about the timing, the percentage, but the fact is that we have rapidly open source community getting on to some of these capabilities. We have community of developers, of course, contributing. We have companies, enterprises, startups, building on top rapidly, and of course that creates a bit of this cumulative effect and rapid adoption. So here in the message, and it was actually summarized very well in the introductory note here, say one way of seeing this, and this is the main theme of all these technologies, when we look over, of course, the past 50 years of technologies, obviously there is a positive and negative side. But here we are more, forward-thinking and positive around the virtuous circle of this new era. And the main message is, and that's what was mentioned in the introduction, about the technology becoming more human-like. So again, you have a prompt, you ask questions, in French slang for me, or a mix of English and French, and it's much better than, the early stages of those technologies. That's just an example, we'll come back to it. And here about the profound human, creativity, ingenuity is how to enable this. And back and forth, of course, for productivity gains or the way of working. The changes also as individuals, we interact with companies. So whether we call it more productivity, more, more efficiencies, and in the end, better experience, we tend to see that in the future, with all these technologies all together, we are onto a road of a positive one. Now, this is very nice to say, but I would flip it, as it was mentioned in the introduction, that if it's not human-like, that if it's controlled or biased, speaking of AI, or if there are not some rules and regulation, you can go, the other way around. So not productive, not acceptable, etc. And essentially, when such technologies are not fully, human-like, we believe that they will either be under control or discarded or pushed back. Okay, so that's kind of the way to see the context, and without going through a whole history of the past 50 years of industry. Some snippets here. Just I won't comment, but this is, we talked about. You mentioned metaverse. So metaverse is dead. Long live the metaverse. Now with spatial computing, digital twin. So some of those that you see, I'll come back to some of them, but those are actually snippets of production-ready applications, whether it's looking at well and mining and using digital twin to much more efficiently, much more safely use those environments, to complex city traffic. I don't know here, but in the south of France, we tend to drive in a particular way, let's say, and so the way to predict, to optimize for safety reason, of course, for congestion and others are such examples. So, and we'll see later some of the other examples. So that's a bit of also the technology vision is a 3 to 5 year exercise, but again, some of this we see already. The question is how fast or how will it evolve, and how, as human, we remain in control from many angles. So, indeed, the title finally. So, how human by design, AI, and I would say technology will unleash, or is already unleashing, the next level of human potential, ingenuity, creativity, and everything that I've already mentioned. In order to do this, so quickly skipping and unveiling. So this year we came up with these 4 kind of macro trends. You will see the first 2, they are all connected to one another. Of course, there is a logic behind, and one is feeding from the other. And of course, I will come for the techies of us here in this more tech community about what we are talking about, about technology, platforms, etc. But essentially, when we try to elevate and see and analyze, so the first 2 are a whole lot around AI. First one, I'll come back to it, is obviously not only the prompts and having a magic answer from ChatGPT or else, but actually being able to, change completely the way companies manage knowledge, knowledge like acquired by their workers on the field, insurance brokers and experts on the field, where every case is very different, and how this can get a bit more structured, fed into, all the way to simply data layers, data mesh, data fabric. So in other words, how you tap into more and more type of data, and AI learns, corrects, and you control. The second one, and again, I'll come with some example, Meet My Agent. So very interesting. I like to call this one, number 2, Meet My Agent around AI is the new API, right? So application programming interface, so fast to say, but how, in the future we'll have more and more, AI systems or AI-enabled ERPs, platforms, natively activated, and how we, again, under the control of human, we interconnect and we elevate, the role of the human and defer to some tasks that are less of value or just plain boring, to be honest, to AI agents interconnected with one another. So different examples. Next one, yeah, indeed, the metaverse. Let's invest in crypto and XR and VR. Now we'll see that this has shaped towards, and it's not just a name change towards spatial computing, just to lipstick on a pig. It's actually much more profound about the environment. Here's a perfect example: one room, a few hundred people, and then other rooms, and then live on YouTube, etc. That's an example. We don't even ask why and so forth. It's part of this. Now this goes much further between the environment's understanding being tailored to us, in whatever type of interaction. And finally, a bit more futuristic, but where we see in healthcare, life science, and other areas already applications around the bodies in electronics. So here it's not about being a Terminator and or exoskeleton alien-like, but it's really on, again, the continuity of the environment understanding, all the way to essentially try to infer, we are quite complex, obviously, as human beings, from body language, from our vitals, etc. So how the technology tries to understand, not control, and actually react and adapt in our profound human dimensions. So that's checking on time, still good. That's for the overview, let's say. Now, this one I love. I won't ask you now in the audience to quiz me on any of those very complex acronyms and some, technology domains, subdomains that you know by heart already. But this is to make it concrete in terms of what are we talking about. Of course, large language models, but I like the last one, RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, all about how you use and control generative AI, content generated, and create a positive feedback loop to remain in control. In other words, when personally, first time I played indeed a few years ago with ChatGPT 2, and then 3, I asked, who is Emmanuel Viale? And I was supposedly a economist out of France. Okay, fine, economist, not really, or I don't know. Anyway, it was crap. Sorry, excuse my French, but it was really not at all accurate. And this is kind of techniques is all about how we, go toward more control in a good way, and so forth. So this one I like in particular. Here you will see, and I know to be a segue to the different breakout sessions later on, robotics, there is indeed the one on robot. We have many, and I'll try to show you some other examples, but that's an example of also the pure hardware technology, not humanoid or humanoid robots, but industrial robots also adapting to the way the worker is conducting tasks as well. So there's a whole lot in there as well. And in some of the brain-computer interface, that are here, you see BCI, that's, whether the cool glasses, that maybe the next generation of Ray-Bans will have actually some form of mind-reading capability. It's actually not working that way, but understanding, the mental state, the attention and everything, that's something we start to see. So that's kind of everything else. Now, some of you will have read, of course, the entire plan for today and all the breakout sessions. I have some friends and colleagues from Accenture presenting on blockchain, quantum, and other, so they are not listed here. But it's not because they are not relevant in the future, but things like next generation computing, quantum security, communication are actually the backbone of all this, right? So that's why they may not be, don't be offended, or my friends of our incubation team will talk about digital identity identity, how to control use blockchain-like distributed ledger technologies, confidential computing. They may not be listed here, but they are fundamental to fluidify the data between the different systems, to protect, encrypt, and also do many, many things, okay? So don't be offended if you don't see your area of passion here. Okay, so much made in AI, again, profoundly to summarize here, as I mentioned, it's all about how we go from just data lakes, dark data, you may remember, it's 90% of the data collected, well, it's not used, so like dark matter in the universe, right? We don't see, we don't know where it is. That's a bit of the parallel, but actually, really putting layers, like again, using data mesh and other techniques, knowledge graphs you may have seen, to be able to really go from data to info, to essentially insights and answers, right? And in the right context, in the right way, the right format, of course. And so here there are different examples. Simple one, Cisco is been able to save 4,600 man-hours a year by just getting into all their PDF documents, massive amount of collection of feedback from end users, when they're with their routers and other appliances, and be able to provide to their level support employees with the right element and the right configuration, etc. So as simple as tapping into massive amount of data and gaining efficiencies, but also you can imagine for the end users here at Cisco to be able to do other things and more value-added type of things. We have other examples. Toyota, again, for those of you who have cars, they have thick manuals, or worse now, inside the GPS. So when you have to read if there is a signal, whatever, you need to turn on the car if it's still charged or still have battery or whatever, and read the user manual for whatever the small. So Toyota started to look at this to incorporate ChatGPT-like, so that the car will tell you its problems, and not you having to figure out and go to page 320 of the user's manual online or whatever. So simple things like this, or we've worked with JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, also to change the way their car configurator can be done, so that you can configure not the car by knowing by heart the options of the car, but actually you can tailor it by natural questions and say, well, I want my car to be doing this of that color, and also adding a 3D rendering piece in there. Second one, again, by examples, Meet My Agent. So again, like I said, more and more, again, Copilot, for those of you who use it, or Google Tools, incorporated already, as essentially agents for us, analyzing our calendar, emails, presentations, chats, and whatnot. That's, for example, for Copilot, and being able to guide us. That's an example of bots that are running in the background and providing, based on our needs as end users, the right info, the right element. But it's also, in other example, Do Not Pay. So this is a startup. It's very interesting, where also they have agents running. So they look on your calendar, your Gmail, your bank account, whatever you have, and you are willing to share, of course, huge amount of personal data from different data sources, and they coordinate these agents with sort of intelligence, reading at your particular subscriptions elements, and actually help you support to minimize, for example, your Netflix account or whatever you're not using, or for example, you get a fine. Also looking at the condition. So that's a simple example. It's just a startup, but imagine when you project this into broader enterprise systems going forward. Now, last example, it was in the news last week. The Nobel Prize of Chemistry was awarded to two teams for the first time ever, using these two trends, essentially, to come up and study proteins. Proteins are the basis of vaccines, of our bodies and everything. Very complex shapes of proteins, and very intractable, very complex problem to solve in terms of possibilities. And they used, so one was around the computational protein design. The other team from Google, DeepMind, was around protein shape prediction. Essentially, it was in silico, so using technologies, plain computers, and not just, trying to mix and experiment in the wet lab, with, all these AI capabilities, from knowledge graph to inference to kind of generating and finding and helping reduce the art of the possible. So I like this one. It's in, in the news. You can look it up. Very complex to explain in a few seconds, but again, the first example of impact, concretely, will be, more faster as human species to come up with vaccines with, for example, in the life science sector. Now I'll hand over to Stephanie. My partner in crime, who's in Sophia Antipolis, if we can. Perfect. So, Stephanie, you have the challenge of, in 2 minutes exactly, to show quickly a demo, if you can zoom on what I've just mentioned and summarize the first 2 trends. Over to you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And hi, everyone. Welcome to Sophia Antipolis. I'm glad to virtually be here with you. And we wanted to show 2 examples to illustrate the 2 first trends that Emmanuel just spoke about. The first one, and I'll go ahead and put it in full screen just so you have a better idea on what we're talking about here. We're actually looking at how we can use a lot of articles, a lot of research papers. You probably know that at Accenture Innovation, we have a lot of researchers. They're reading a lot of documents all the time. But how can you actually extract all of that knowledge and kind of prepare and understand and bring together specific links between all of these research papers in order to grasp, and that's exactly what Emmanuel said, some of the insights that potentially you could have on all of those research papers. And so that's really what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to understand all those different documentations. Here in this case, we're trying to predict link predictions between diseases and potentially genes or other criteria. And we're trying to really grasp all of that data, understand it, make sense of it, and kind of extract all the different knowledge that we could potentially acquire from those different types of documents. But obviously, we try to keep all of this responsible, and we make sure that we are clear in what we're doing. And obviously, responsible AI is key to everything that we do. So that's why we also developed a tool, which is actually an assistant tool. It's not a legal advisor, but it's pretty close. And you're actually able to ask a couple of questions to better understand exactly if your AI model is actually aligned with regulations in the AI EU Act. That's a hard one to say. And here, as you can see, it's a pretty simple chatbot that I'm going to be able to discuss with, understand, give them a bit more information about what type of AI system I'm trying to build, tell them what type of data I might potentially process, and based on that, I'm able to get an advisor in order to tell me if I'm aligned or not with my initial request and what I'm trying to achieve. So that's pretty much the 2 trends, the 2 examples that we wanted to give for this first illustration. I'll hand back over to you, Emmanuel.
Perfect, thank you, because my AI companion, which is the clock, is telling me we need to accelerate a bit. So thank you. We'll come back maybe to close and say goodbye. So trend number 3, the space we need. Again, it's much more than just the metaverse, using fancy Ray-Bans, augmented reality or filming things. It's, tapping into, for example, on the videos here, how engineering can change completely, here in this case for turbine, with simulation. Of course, there is the big visualization part, but again, here, the link with the previous trends on how you are able to inject, the data, the physics element here, and be able to analyze and accelerate the process. So here we have different examples. For example, in robotics, you will see later. So we have much more of a Boston Dynamics using and integrating ChatGPT-like features, and the robots have a virtual double. You can simulate many things, and again, to connect the dots with the previous 2 trends, are also understanding a bit their environment. It's also about more the sensorial element. In the metaverse, we had disconnected experiences, also sometimes poor 3D environments. So here also many work from a technology standpoint, with universal standard descriptor format, for 3D interconnection, all the way to the way it's used, again, robots I mentioned with, the first teleoperation in China. That's another example where they use precision robotics for a surgeon to operate a patient 4,600 kilometers away. So you can imagine how the precision is very important, the delays or lack of delay was important. So we see all these myriad of technologies, if you remember one of the earlier slides, being combined to one another. What's key here from, let's say, the metaverse buzz a few years ago is we've started, especially in the industrial sector, to find the killer apps. And that's, in the automotive sector, again, this is where we see a whole lot of adoption. Going a bit quicker, just to stay on time, and the last one, again, when you have this environment, phygital environment, understanding its context, when it's also being able to do this phygitally and in a hybrid way, what's the next step, let's say, for technology to become fundamentally human, not miming humans, but understanding. And so I mentioned in the introduction, the complexity of the way, we are. Naturally, we are human, we always say. So here, whether it's, I have this famous Oura ring, and I'm going to check my body temperatures and whatnot later on, and all the way, to some of the goggles, all the way to the headband, which I can wear very easily myself. When you have a spider and it reads your brain or brain waves, for example. All this to say, again, the last mile, maybe, and not too far out in the future, is how technology fundamentally understands the context. I may be, with a lot of energy one day, but in a bad mood for some reason. What does it mean for the system, for, again, the robot I'm about to operate? Or simply the way, precision robotics is all about this, is how between two workers, having the right gesture, but essentially they will be different, even though the end result will be the same in terms of quality and everything. So here there are different examples. I think the one I like, which is not about the device itself, but the Apple Vision Pro, now fairly expensive, okay, but actually it embarks a whole lot of cameras and sensors to understand with simple finger movements, micro cameras, where you're looking and anticipating as much. So it's a cool device, great, but what if those, and are being put into trucks for, transport and maintenance? What about if they are put, of course, in connected cars, and they are started to be? That's also what we're looking at. This sort of ambient computing is very important. So we have 1 minute and 45 seconds, Stephanie, just to really show, and we'll see some other robots. But yeah, here you are, just really 30 seconds of what we're looking at here. And then I'll cut you off.
Exactly, and what you can see in the back here, it's actually my colleague. She's remote operating Spot, so the robot you can see here, where she's actually leveraging two devices, a joystick to be able to move the robot forward, backward, left, and right, and another device that is actually, it's almost like a stylet, it's what we call a touch, and you can operate the robotic arm here, so you can actually do quite precise actions, such as grabbing a bag, or potentially train yourself if you're in a medical context and you need to put a catheter or something in someone's arm. You could actually use that. And what's really interesting here, and one of the very important aspects, is that we're actually having force feedback here, meaning that when she pushes the device, if the robot actually feels some retention or some feedback, she's actually going to be able to have exactly the same feedback with the device. So see here, we're really trying to do a double version between what's happening with the robot and when she can actually feel when she's operating the robot. So obviously,
Perfect.
There's a lot of different use cases we can imagine. And I'll hand over to you,
perfect.
Emmanuel.
Thank you, Stephanie. Again, we wanted to cram a whole lot of demos and content and example, but to stay on time. So again, summary, to really get the key messages. So again, we've seen along the past decade of technologies, every time some major waves happening, combining with one another. We think, at such an intersection point. There is, of course, additional elements. It was very well mentioned in the introduction about the responsible element, the human aspect. And we believe technologies, will remain under the control of us and adapt to us, not the other way around. Thank you for your attention.